Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today we're continuing our conversation about Venusians with Brian Walker of Brian's Drive-In Theater. There are so many great, not so great, and truly memorable because they're not so great films of Venusians, and today we're going to delve deeper into that particular world. Greetings, Brian. Thank you for doing this.
Well, it's great to see you again tonight, Hercules. And I would probably call some of these films notorious more than anything else.
I like that.
Well, and some of them have fantastic titles that it would really be hard to write a script that would live up to them. And fortunately, nobody has. And I ran one of those movies today. Today's movie of the day was Larry Buchanan's 1967 made for TV feature, I should say, called Zontar, the Thing from Venus.
I
With
saw on your page. Yes.
yeah, yeah, and it's a John Agar film, and John Agar made a number of films for American International Pictures in the 50s and 1960s, and the producer Sam Arkoff was portioning out the films that he had the rights to from AIP's back catalog into TV syndication packages. And he, in order to make a big enough package, he needed about 8 more films. And Zontar, the Thing from Venus, is one of the 8 movies that Sam Arkoff had produced for about $200,000 to do all 8 films.
Wow.
And they were never released to theaters. They were released directly into syndication packages, or a horror syndication package. And for the most part, they were all remakes of fairly successful American International properties from the 1950s. Zontar, the Thing from Venus, is actually a remake of a 1956 AIP film called It Conquered the World with Beverly Garland, Peter Graves, and Lee Van Cleef. And in this iteration of it, in the Larry Buchanan iteration, John Agar takes the Peter Graves role, essentially. The director has a really interesting background. Larry Buchanan grew up in an orphanage near Dallas, Texas. And after a stint in the Army Signal Corps during World War II, he went to Hollywood and more or less just tried to break into the industry wherever he could. I don't think he had a really clear vision of what he wanted to do initially, when he was young. But he started working in the prop department at 20th Century Fox in the late 1940s, and somehow managed to secure a contract as an actor for Fox in the early 1950s. It didn't go anywhere. But he was under contract as an actor for a little while, not very long. But that wasn't really what he wanted to do anyway. By the time he'd gotten a contract as an actor, what he really wanted to do was to direct. And in the early 1950s, he got the opportunity to direct some television programs. He did some writing as well. He wrote for the Gabby Hayes Show in the early 1950s for television. And by the 1960s, he was directing pictures here and there, but he did get that 8-picture deal with Sam Arkoff to do these horror and science fiction films on the cheap. They were all shot in Dallas, Texas, and I suspect they were shot very quickly as well. He did the films on average for about $25,000 a piece, and that wasn't much money in the 60s.
Oh,
They were shot on 16 millimeter film, as opposed to 35 or something like that. Back then, for television broadcast, 16 millimeter was the norm. When you saw a syndication package copy of, let's say, The Beginning of the End, Um, that was a 16 millimeter copy, of the original 35 millimeter film. So they just skipped 35 millimeter because this was going to be shown on television anyway, and not at a great resolution. You remember what TV screens
Yes.
used to look like. You got a vague impression of what the actor looked like, but it wasn't necessarily a really clear one. Those pixels on TVs used to be, what, like about the size of I don't know, like a quarter or something like that. They were really big, and they were round at the time. In the 1970s, some of the Japanese television manufacturers went to pixels that were more rectangular, smaller in nature, with less black space, so you got better color out of those. But the old school TVs that you and I probably grew up with had the big round pixels that didn't give you a whole lot of sharpness.
No,
And
I
and
remember this.
right, and Larry Buchanan knew that, so he didn't worry so much about set dressing or anything. And one of my good friends was in one of his movies. He's since passed on, but and I mentioned Aaron before, but Aaron
Yes.
Kincaid did one of the films titled "Creature of Destruction." It was one of the 8 Larry Buchanan movies that he did for that syndication package that I mentioned. And one night over a few drinks, I asked Aaron about the movie, and Aaron could be a lot of fun, but he was very serious about his career, and wanted to at one time wanted to be an actor who did great things. He didn't want to be stuck doing teen pictures and beach movies and stuff, but that's how he got into the business. And he signed a contract with American International. And AIP didn't do that very often with actors. So having Aaron signed to an exclusive contract was kind of a lark, for AIP. Initially, when Aaron broke through in I want to say mid '60s, he was getting an avalanche of fan letters and things like that, and AIP, I guess, wanted to snap him up to keep that going. Um, but they didn't really use him, the way they should. And Creature of Destruction was sort of the end of Aaron's contract with AIP, and he was kind of eager to shed the contract, to tell you the truth, and was just horribly embarrassed by this movie. he he asked me, while he was alive, he asked me to never post anything about that movie on the profile page that I have for him, and I didn't. And after he passed away, I did, because it was a public domain film. And actually has a few public domain movies that I can run, in addition to this, in addition to Creature of Destruction. He told me that they could only afford to have him there for 3 days. So he had to fly from Los Angeles to Dallas and was there 3 days. And they had gotten behind in production. So a lot of his line dubbing was done in a taxi on the way to the Dallas airport
Wow.
on a reel-to-reel tape recorder. It was just him with the script. And I don't think he could have gotten out of Dallas fast enough. He was really appalled by the whole thing. It's not as though he was used to like big budget MGM spectaculars and having his own trailer or anything like that. But this was sort of a new low for him. And I think it was a turning point for him too. He became not disillusioned so much with acting, but more disinterested, I would say, than anything else, in the early '70s, and
That's
and
sad.
left it. Yeah, and left it for other lines of work. And I mean, we've all been there before. You can only try to shove a square peg in a round hole so long, and if things aren't working out, if they're not coming together, you have to go in a different direction. And
That,
that's what he.
that's very true in any type of career. I remember I was in the human services and education, and I've done a bunch of things. and I would only stay if it became clear that I belonged there to do something that I felt was important. I'd stick around. But if I saw that it was going to be going no place and just doing the same thing every day, I just start looking for another job. I keep that job. I do well at it to get the reference and, learn what I can from it. But I'd be out of there, fast, because I've seen people waste years going nowhere, and I didn't want to be one of those people.
Well, I had a very different employment experience because I was essentially with the same organization for 35 years.
But you have
Um,
responsibility and
oh, I had vastly different jobs within that organization. But since I live in a college town, and the university is, the biggest employer here. We've thousands of employees between campus and the hospitals. So it was easy to stay within an organization of that size. Even in a small town where you typically don't have quite as many um, opportunities. But this area does have other opportunities rather than the university now because it's grown quite a bit. But in the 80s when I first started working, this was the big game in town, and um, being married to somebody with a job that said university, a position at the university, kind of made staying here a necessity. So I just sort of dug my heels in. But like you, if I saw that this wasn't going anywhere, or maybe I just didn't like the work, I would move on, and I did several times. So I understand that, and Aaron apparently understood it as well. He after his acting career, after he decided to chuck it all, he put his house up for rent in Beverly Hills, and he moved to San Francisco and stayed there for years. He started out tending bar. I mean, he went from acting to tending bar, sort of one week to the next, and then kind of fell into a modeling career, which he did for, I don't know, probably 10, 15 years. Very successful, too. He did a lot of print, a little bit of commercials. It was largely print that he did. And from there, he started doing a lot of cartoon and video game voiceovers. He was great with impersonations and different accents, and he could you just seamlessly flow into them. He could do everyone's voice from Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. He could have read the whole script himself. It would have been awesome. He did a good Betty Davis, but he did a good Joan Crawford too, interestingly. Um, and later in life, he took up painting, and I think he was always interested in art, from childhood, but started painting in earnest later in life, and was very good. He could do some beautiful landscapes, but he was also excellent at doing cartoon caricatures of famous actors. He had a whole series from the Zodiac, where he would take, a different actress to represent that Zodiac symbol because it was hers. And he did like people like Mae West and Katharine Hepburn, and did them as caricatures of their astrological signs, and it's just beautifully done. I've got copies of the images somewhere here in the house.
If they
But
recorded that, that would be awesome. A lot of people are into the Zodiac, and I'm sure they'd love something like that.
well, I think I do have maybe a picture or two from that set on the Aaron Kincaid page. I would have to go look to be sure. But I think I do have. I think he did give me some very nice copies of some of his work. And he gave me this beautiful copy that I've got framed in my dining room. It's a caricature of Betty Davis and Joan Crawford from Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and the Betty Davis caricature is holding the platter,
Mm.
that the rat would have been on. And Joan Crawford is to her right, with huge eyes, and in the wheelchair. It's so well done, and I thought the dining room was the best place for it.
Sounds appropriate.
It is. It's been in there probably for 15 years. I mean, he gave it to us a long time ago, and it's one of my more cherished possessions, I guess. But yeah, Aaron didn't have much good to say about. He didn't have anything negative to say about working with anybody. Well, I mean, that's not true. But he didn't have anything negative to say about working with anyone in Creature of Destruction because he wasn't there very long. It was just 3 days. It would be kind of hard to remember that out of a whole life. He did say that Les Tremayne, who is a character actor who's also in Creature of Destruction, was fun to work with. He'd never worked with him before. And Les Tremayne was in like every other. He was a character actor and was in every other science fiction film. He did lots of voiceover work because he had this very sonorous voice, very well spoken, very sophisticated sounding, erudite, and apparently didn't say no to many roles. So I think that's why he's in Creature of Destruction. But you know you got to eat, and you got to go where the work is. Um, but some of the other movies that Larry Buchanan did, um, there's a litany of them really, and he did them all within the span of about a year. Uh, they they were produced between late 1967 and late 1968, but turning out 8 films, and in many cases he had to rewrite the scripts, or just rewrite them from what he remembered the plot lines being. That would be a huge, make 8 films in 1 year. That would be a huge undertaking, especially since he didn't have any help. It was just him. So if you look at it from that point of view, I think it's kind of it's a stupendous feat. On the other hand, if you watch the individual movies, you're like, oh my God. I mean, I got to say, comparing Zontar, the Thing from Venus, to the original film, It Conquered the World. Uh, It Conquered the World is actually pretty well acted and it's well produced. The only issue with the film is at the very end when you get the artichoke monster from Venus, Uh, and apparently, everybody on the set of It Conquered the World was really interested in what the monster was going to look like because none of them had seen it, and they were almost finished with production. When they finished production, they shot it in Bronson Canyon because the monster was back in the cave, and Bronson Canyon, you didn't need a permit to shoot there because it wasn't in any municipality or anything. And so many different movies have used that same part of the canyon. Robot Monster, an endless number of 50s and 60s science fiction films. Some TV shows even used it because it was just accessible. And where do you find a cave where you can shoot? Well, Bronson Canyon.
There you go.
Anyway, I saw this interview with Beverly Garland years ago,
Uh,
probably more than 20 years ago. Well, but she died in 2006, so it was well before that. But she was interviewed, and she said that the cast was really excited about the film, and the script was pretty good, and it had some dramatic moments. That it has a great cast, really good cast. And she said at the very end, when they're shooting in Bronson Canyon, she said she saw the monster and she was just crestfallen. I mean, she had a really good attitude. She knew exactly what the quality of work that she was appearing in. But that didn't deter her. I mean, she always did the best that she could. And she said it was really hard to get through the scene because they just kept giggling after seeing the monster. And occasionally in those situations, the actors would just freak out. They would panic. I do remember Mara Corday saying that at the premiere of the giant claw, which is this bird that um, begins menacing aircraft. Um, and the bird, it looks like a rubber chicken. It is it's horrible. And Mara Corday was kind of laughing along with everybody else at the premiere, and her co-star Jeff Morrow was just crestfallen, just beside himself. I think he walked out, of the premiere because people were laughing and it looked ridiculous on screen. Um, Beverly Garland wasn't one of those people, though. I mean, she rolled with the punches and did what she was supposed to do, and did the best that she could. And that's all you can really ask.
Of anybody.
Mhm. And knowing that it conquered the world has a passage at the end with the monster from Venus, and how it is kind of ridiculous looking. Zontar, the thing from Venus, is 10 times, maybe 100 times worse. it's, you never get to see the monster. Well, like the original movie, you don't get to see the monster until the end, and the monster is even less believable in Zontar than it is in the original movie. It just sort of looks like it almost looks like something from a Lloyd Kaufman film. It just looks vaguely melted, and it has three eyes. It's just the strangest. It's not horrific. It's not horrifying. It's horrific. I guess maybe that's the way to put it. uh, but nonetheless, I mean, it's a fun film. It does drag some in the middle, and occasionally you might have to fight sleep to get through Zontar. But the performances in it are okay. It's mostly John Agar, and John Agar, I think, doesn't necessarily get the respect that he deserved. He did lots of B movies over the course of his career, but I can't say that he was ever bad in anything. I mean, he liked cocktails. We'll say that. I think he was busted for drunk driving at least once, maybe more than that. And from what I understand, was one of Ed Wood's drinking buddies. Believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, if you can keep up with Ed Wood.
He had that reputation.
uh,
He had that reputation.
but I think he might have been one of those rare people who might handle it better than. Sir, I mean, he lived into old age, so it didn't hurt his longevity maybe so much. Ed Wood died really young. He was only 54, but I think he had Ed had a
Eventful life.
case of alcoholism that I think was exceptional. I think it was just so bad. Um, but these Larry Buchanan movies are fun, and the titles I think are awesome. Zontar, the Thing from Venus. It would be kind of hard to write a script that would live up to that title. It's a great title, but looking at the other Larry Buchanan titles, it's really impressive. Mars Needs Women was one of those, and that stars Tommy Kirk and Yvonne Craig, both of whom were kind of struggling with their careers. Tommy Kirk had gotten busted at a pot party, and he had also been discovered as gay by the Walt Disney Company. So he had kind of hit a rough patch. He was having some alcohol and drug addiction problems. Yvonne Craig was coming out of Batman and didn't really have any prospects as an actress. She was past 30, at that point, and had gone so far, but kind of like you with one of your jobs, I think she'd gotten to a level, and then there just wasn't any, possible upward movement. And she saw the writing on the wall and decided to sell real estate, go into business, which she was very successful. So I guess that happens to a lot of people. Um, you get to that one job, or for an actor, perhaps that one movie that you start you start reevaluating what you're doing and what your goals were. And oddly enough, some of the people that I know who did Larry Buchanan's movies had that epiphany, that revelation during production. Aaron was one of them, and another friend of mine, Quinn O'Hara, was in Larry Buchanan's In the Year 2889, which also stars Charlotte Doherty and Paul Peterson. She had the same epiphany. she, Quinn was the sweetest person on earth. She was so kind, so nice.
Like, he was a Zen master of some type, helping people transform their lives through revelations that changed the course of what they did.
Well, that's a nice way to think of Larry Buchanan. But with Quinn, she did this movie, which actually, the movie that she was in, which was produced in 1968, was a remake of The Day the World Ended, which starred Mike Connors and Adele Jurgens. Yeah, and it actually has Laurie Nelson's in it. And I'm a big Laurie Nelson fan. She, started off in the Ma and Pa Kettle movies in the early 1950s, and when she was a teenager, and as she moved into adulthood, she moved into some racier roles. She stars in Hot Rod Girl for American International, interestingly, and she's in a movie with Mamie Van Doren titled Untamed Youth. That's a lot of fun. And believe it or not, yeah, Lori and Mamie Van Doren, although they seem kind of very different types, were lifelong friends after that. They stayed in touch until Lori Nelson passed away just a few years ago.
Very cool.
Mhm. It's nice to hear good things about people,
Yes.
and it's nice to see that an actress as sweet as Lori Nelson came across in the roles that she did in films and on television. She actually was, that person. As very good natured as she was. She did a television show in the late 50s with Mary Anders and Barbara Eden called How to Marry a Millionaire. And it was based on the early 1950s film with Lauren Bacall, Marilyn Monroe, and Betty Grable. It lasted for 2 seasons, but Lori Nelson left after the first season because she'd gotten married, and she was married to Johnny Mann of the Johnny Mann Singers, and started to raise a family, and wasn't real happy with the way her career was going, and decided to walk away from it, but stayed in touch with Barbara Eden, and other people that she had known from her Hollywood days. And she threw Barbara Eden a baby shower
Oh, wow.
when her son, right before her son was born in early 1965. There are pictures of it on, you'll see him every once in a while swing by on Facebook, and it's just odd to see, you know, Barbara Eden's about 8 months pregnant, and Lori Nelson's holding the cake, and it's really interesting to see that snapshot. Uh, that's the most fun thing about social media, is that you get to see images that you would, or and video that you would ordinarily never have access to.
Very, very true. And if you like a certain movie or a certain type of movie, there's enough to keep you busy for as long as you want to spend on YouTube or any one of the other sites where people store videos.
Very true. And speaking of which, most of those 8 films that, not all of them, but most of those 8 films that Larry Buchanan did for AIP, for that syndication package, are public domain. A couple of them aren't, but most of them are. Mars Needs Women, I believe, is still under copyright. And finding out what's public domain and what's not
Oh, yeah.
it's impossible You know, you have to, you already have to have, fallen to earth knowing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's very hard because when I was putting together the package for local cable, I think I even asked you to just double check
Hmm.
what you could find because the information, well, some of them they were labeled public domain, but I knew from my friend who's a filmmaker that he owned things that were still under copyright, but they were appearing, like in uh, let's say the Walmart discount bin or the Kmart discount bin put out by other people. And it's expensive to fight it. And that the people who are duplicating it while still in copyright know that. And most people won't find it worth their while to take it to court because you already lost your property. Then you'll lose a ton of money, and it's not guaranteed that the outcome will be favorable to you. So, yeah,
Whoever, whoever has the deeper pockets wins in those cases,
yes.
for the most part. But you can exhaust people's resources pretty easily. Major corporations do it all the time. It's hard to sue a big corporation and win. You have to prove malice. And, you you have to prove that they are intentionally trying to screw up your life. Every once in a while it happens, but usually they come up with a settlement because, and one is probably not the greatest,
No.
because you simply can't afford it. I mean, if I got into a lawsuit with somebody, like a big corporation, I mean, my your resources would be exhausted. You know, I mean, $300-400 an hour, that's not hard to go through all that, you know.
And that's why they do it that way. And
Mhm.
I remember him sharing the negotiations for a settlement and things like that, and they kept dicking him around
Mhm.
continuously. And again, what's he going to do about it?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was
So you're going to spend, $20,000 to get $5 back. What do what do you do? Um, but as I was saying, most of these films are public domain, except for Mars Needs Women. I don't believe is public domain, and Attack of the Eye Creatures, which I haven't mentioned before. Attack of the Eye Creatures stars John Ashley, and believe it or not, actually two of John Ashley's sons, no, one of John Ashley's sons, excuse me, follows me on Facebook and occasionally will comment when I will run one of his father's pictures.
awesome.
Yeah, it is nice.
That
Uh,
is awesome. I found out that Reg Park, his two kids are in my friends list.
oh,
Uh,
really? John?
yes, and his daughter. And
I can't remember her name, but
neither can I like right now. But I was like totally flattered because Reg Park's one of my favorite Herculeses.
well, and imagine being your Reg Park's son. That would be a lot to live up to. His father did so much.
Hmm.
He was Mr. Universe. He was Hercules. He was, a proprietor, a business owner. He had a magazine. Uh, he did it. He did so much. At gymnasiums. That'd be kind of tough to live up to, don't you think? Anything that you would do in comparison as a child would just be, it would be hard to impress your father if your father was that accomplished. Um, but there again, at least your father would have been somebody to look up to, certainly as Reg Park, I'm sure, was.
Now, you didn't mention today, so perhaps we're going to have a part three, or you might have mentioned it in one of our previous shows. But Queen of Outer Space with Zsa Zsa Gabor, that's a Venus film. I was very
It
surprised.
it certainly is. And I think that was a turning point in Zsa Zsa's her acting career too. When her career took off in the early 50s, she was, it didn't last very long, but for a little while, she was a big star. She had married well. I can't remember which husband, George. Oh golly, I can't remember the actor's name. It's escaping me at the moment. But she married George Sanders, who was a very debonair character actor in 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s movies. And when Zsa Zsa Gabor married him, he was sort of at the height, of his acting career. Um, he was in such films as oh golly, All About Eve with Betty Davis. He's got a great role in that. He could be usually he wasn't a protagonist so much as maybe an antagonist. But that was his strength. He kind of played to his. He just worked very well as kind of a devious character. He was very good at that and excelled at that kind of role. They were married for a few years. Later on, he married Zsa Zsa's sister Magda for just a little while, not for very long. Magda wasn't an actress, but was still part of the family. It was still a fairly well-known part of the family. Um, but I can't remember where was I going? Oh, Zsa Zsa Gabor and Queen of Outer Space. Yeah. Uh, Zsa Zsa's career in the 50s was going pretty well, and then it just started to slide. Um, and she said yes to a role in Queen of Outer Space, which actually has a terrific cast. Um, and it's a lot of fun to watch. It's well produced too. I mean, it's not as cheap as some movies. I mean, it does have a sensational title. It also has a fantastic title. I mean, how can you resist? You're a kid in the late 50s and you see this, glamorous B plus A minus movie star, and she's in this science fiction film. But in that sense, a fun science fiction film.
Her,
And she comes, and
her
she
accent
comes,
was mute, like she didn't have her extreme accent like she had later on in life in A Queen from Outer Space.
well, remember in the 50s, when she was in doing films like such as Moulin Rouge, she had all kinds of coaches to
Okay.
help her with her lines and things. And every actor, I don't know about now, but back in the day, a lot of actors would have voice coaches and acting coaches who helped them. Aaron, my friend, he had a couple of famous actors as his coaches. Um, and sometimes that's what older actors will do. They will start, to try to make extra money when the roles stop coming in. And for Aaron, his vocal coach was Keith Andes, who was an actor in the 50s and 60s. Very well known actor, great voice. He had a nice deep, voice, and I it's interesting that Aaron, who he had a great command of his voice, would need a vocal coach, but a lot of them do, and especially if you have to do an accent, and in Zsa Zsa's case, she had to do
Undoing.
an Americanized English. She probably did sound a little more American then. And when she did do lots of TV, started doing a lot of TV appearances in the 60s, she mostly did them as herself.
Hmm.
And if you're playing yourself, and if you are sort of a continental actress, you're going to play up that accent. You don't want to get rid of it.
Right.
You want to milk it for all it's worth. So I think her accent does kind of swing back around, and the same for her sister Ava. I think that was a shtick on Green Acres with Ava.
Uh-huh.
I mean, she would always butcher the the names of certain things or products or people, and it was just like a running gag on the show. So so much for trying to perfect your English. Turn into Charo and just start spewing know, combination of two or three languages. Uh, it gave people character. That's something that's kind of missing in our culture now too. We've massaged a lot of accents out.
Right.
Of and you in your area, New Jersey. Years ago, we at the university that I used to work for, a lot of our students come from New Jersey. Um, and you used to get a New Jersey accent, and you don't hear it among those students anymore. Or if you do, it's so subtle that it's not much.
In Greece, when I was growing up, um, different villages that might be like not that big a walk away spoken different dialects, and
Mhm.
somebody across the island, and it's a small island, you can barely understand them, and much less going to other islands, where they might as well have been speaking a foreign language. But then when the Greek government standardized the Dimotiki, the state Greek, that started getting rid of a lot of the old accents and a lot of the old words, because this was the official language. And they had for a while something called Katharevusa, which was a formal language where some words were in plural, and you addressed people in authority a certain way, and things like that. But then they did away with it later on. So those are the things that finally got rid of the regional culture, I guess, and the regional dialects. So I'm not surprised in America too, because we have TV and computers, and so,
Radio
yeah.
and radio and film. If I love old films from the late 1920s and early 1930s. A lot of them are creaky and staged more as plays than films, but they're really interesting to watch, and they're getting close to 100 years old now, which just blows my mind. But if you listen to the diction that a lot of those actors used in the late 1920s and early 1930s, knowing that a lot of them had come from Broadway, um, they had come from the legitimate stage. Uh, their enunciation of certain words is just bizarre. I mean, these people are from Brooklyn, but they've got these almost British accents. It's, it's really strange, and a lot of it was just that theater training for them. But that rubbed off on a lot of those people did radio, so you heard those accents and you heard them, nationwide. So like the state that I'm living in, West Virginia, a lot of people would assume that you would hear a Southern accent, and in parts of this state, especially the southern part of the state, you can hear very thick Southern accents. In the northern part, you don't hear it at all. It's strange. It is West Virginia is kind of in an odd area. We were Union in the Civil War, and we were the only state created out of the Civil War when we broke off from Virginia in 1863. And I think that's where a lot of the regionalism starts in the state. That is, different parts of the state have different accents, but I don't think it's anything like what it was.
Yeah.
Even in my lifetime, I don't hear the accents that I used to hear. Just 3 weeks ago, we were in Michigan for several days. Had a great time. We're in the Saginaw Valley in a town called Frankenmuth, which is a German village in Michigan. It has the world's largest Christmas store, which is Bronner's Christmas Wonderland. It's enormous. It takes hours to go through if you're a Christmas fan. It is something to see inside and out. They have an area that you can drive through along the border of the parking lot at night, and it's all lit up. There's a chapel in part of it that's a model of a chapel from Germany, and it's almost completely round. A beautiful inside, really neat town. But it has that typical Upper Midwest accent. Did you ever see Fargo with Francis McDormand, the
Yeah.
Coen Brothers movie?
Yeah.
Okay,
Midwest. Yeah,
Do you remember that accent?
not offhand.
Pardon me?
Not offhand. I don't remember the accent.
Okay. Well, if you ever see it again, listen to the accents in Fargo because they were spot on. They sound so that Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, that there is this Midwest accent that runs through it. And it's as strong as any Southern dialect I've ever heard. And sometimes it's hard to understand. But that's sort of the accent that I grew up with. And it is not anywhere near as strong up there as it used to be. And I think a lot of it's just, 70, well, 80, years of television
Yeah.
and 100 years of radio and films too. I mean, it's you emulate what you see and what you hear, you know. And I don't think a lot of people talk that much anymore. At least when I'm on campus, I never see like groups of students talking. They might be walking together, but they're not really conversing.
Yeah, the people are on the phone. We watch people all the time. They're not. They're talking on the phone,
Yeah,
but they're not talking to each other.
yeah, they're like this. And I'm like, put your damn phone down.
It's disconcerting when they have the headphone things on. You can't see any phone, so
And they walk by and they're talking. And it's just like
yeah.
talking to me. It's go have your conversation in private. The rest of us don't need to hear that. And we don't need to know what you ate for breakfast or that you just bombed a test in Professor Smith's class. I don't need to know.
People share that. They share pictures of their lunch and things like that. And
Doesn't it drive you nuts? I had a friend who sadly passed away in June. But he traveled internationally doing recruitment for the university. So he would go into areas that did have, some vastly different cuisines than the ones we're used to here in a college town. And some of it was looked really exotic and sounded very interesting, and some of it was absolutely disgusting. Especially, the fermented beans that the Japanese eat, which are rotten beans and they're sticky and they've been cooked for months.
sounds very appetizing.
Oh. And he would go on and on about he had to eat a live squid. I think this was in Japan too. And was served a live squid and was telling us about eating it. And he wasn't all that he ate it, but he wasn't all that impressed with it. And I think it's disgusting to eat something live, like that. Yuck.
When I was younger, I was much more experimental with food. I used to go to different types of restaurants because I know the Greeks ate things that are disturbing to most people. Like, when I was growing up, my mother and everybody's mother used to bake like a lamb's head with the eyes still in, and you'd eat
Uh,
the cheeks and the eyes and things like that. So I would try to experiment with authentic cuisine. So like with Oriental food, I remember having duck blood with leeks and chicken feet with stuff. And I worked in Harlem, so I would try the soul food, and have
mm,
ham
mm.
hocks. And so I got to eat all sorts of things that I wouldn't have considered food growing up in a Greek American household.
My upbringing was entirely different. I had a mother that was not really interested in cooking, and only would do it under duress. uh, and my dad was on the road a lot when I was a kid. He was always, in school or working in a different city or something like that. So she wasn't going to cook for one. So oftentimes she would just throw me in the car and we'd go out and get something to eat. Um, she wasn't going to cook. So that's kind of how I grew up. And after a while, after I could reach the stove, and operate the controls and everything, I was largely up to me. Certainly breakfast, that's easy, cereal, things like that. But lunch, that started to involve cooking. And they didn't have things that you could just tear off the you tear off the lid or nuke or anything like that. I mean, you had to make them. If it was rice roni or something like that. And if you did have Chef Boyardee, chances are you still had to heat it on the stovetop, so you were still not cooking, but at least heating it up. And that's largely what I grew up on. McDonald's, other fast food places, and stuff out of boxes, like Kraft mac and cheese, rice roni.
American cultural cuisine.
Oh, the Chef Boyardee, the pizza in the box. Do you remember that? I think you can still buy it. I think it. If you bought a box, it made two pizzas.
Yeah, the frozen pizza, right? Yeah.
No, 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 it wasn't frozen. No, you had to make it. It was in a box. It came with a can of like Parmesan cheese and a can of sauce. You don't remember those?
I remember them, but I haven't seen those in a while.
I think you can. I think I did within the last year or so. I think you can still. But back then, for I don't know what they called, probably like 59 cents or whatever it was back then. Um, it, it wasn't the best pizza you were going to eat, but if you put your own toppings on it, it wasn't too bad.
Yeah, I can't have pizza now. It's one of the worst things I can eat, actually, because I'm diabetic. But I used to love making pizza. I used to take pita bread or something similar to that, and I used to put my own sauce on it, and mozzarella cheese, and the vegetables, and just stick it in the oven for a little while, and it was great. Make your own pizza.
One, have you tried the cauliflower crust pizza or anything like that? I mean, can you eat that?
Yes, I can eat that. I've tried that because it's something I
It's
can.
disgusting,
It
but
tastes very well. So it's like,
I see, I dislike. I will eat almost anything, but I cannot eat cauliflower. I can't swallow it. Cooked or raw, I just can't do it. I can chew it and chew it and chew it, but it just does, I can't swallow it. And I thought, when the cauliflower crusts became a thing, what, 10 or 15 years ago, I thought, well, if it's riced and then made into a pizza shell, I could probably eat it. And I've tried several times, and it's disgusting. It tastes like cauliflowers. Ugh, no.
yeah, I like cauliflower in riced cauliflower. It's kind of like, since I can't eat rice, it takes its place. So that's not that bad. Sometimes they mix up with broccoli or so. I put stuff on top of that, and it's not exactly the same as eating rice, but it's close enough. Uh,
Well, there are rice substitutes that you can get that are made out of chickpeas and other things. And I've tried some of those, and they're okay. I just can't handle the cauliflower stuff. Yuck. Like I said, I'll eat most anything, but cauliflower and lima beans, it's a big no. Neither one. Can't do it.
Now, our conversation of today is almost over. Is there anything you'd like to say in passing? Is there a Venus part three, or should we just pass on to other planets?
We should probably move on to other planets. Mars would be
Yes,
rich. I, well, we could talk about Larry Buchanan. Mars needs women.
these women, and Devil Woman from Mars, and
That's a fun movie and public domain. With Hazel Court and Patricia Laffin, and Patricia Laffin is the fascist alien. She's yeah, we should do that. That would be a really fun one
and of
to
course
do.
we have coming up Giants of Metropolis, where we
Hmm?
have Bella Cortez, and she'll give us memories. She's been sharing memories of some of the movies, and some of the things going on were horrendous. Like, she doesn't want to talk about Tor, at all, because of how unpleasant it was filming Tor. Uh,
Oh,
so anyway, whatever movies she feels like talking about, we'll talk about those movies. But I told her that I purchased the Giants of Metropolis, and so I'm going to watch that, and then I'll call you to see when you're available, and then contact her to see when she's available. We'll schedule that sometime within the coming month, and then we'll pick another movie.
Well, great.
And also, I have a group of people that I talk mostly metaphysics and occult and UFO stuff with. So I started going back to not only occult and pop culture literature on like planetary UFOs and contactees and stuff like that, but I'm weaving all that into the mix as well as pop culture in the form of books and comic books and so forth, because these planets live for us. We have different mythologies, like Edgar Rice Burroughs. He did the Mars series, the Venus series, and they influenced a lot of people. I don't think they made any of his Venus books into movies, but the Princess of Mars got made twice.
Right.
So it should be a fun ride.
We can also talk about Abbott and Costello go to Mars, because
Yes.
they actually go to Venus. So we got a tie-in there.
Okay, fantastic. So we'll plan the Mars episode and the Giants of Metropolis episodes next.
Sounds good.
Ryan, I want to thank you. You're awesome. And
Thank you,
I
Hercules.
really appreciate you taking the time to do these conversations, and I know I appreciate them a lot. If I don't collapse, because today was a phenomenally long and eventful day, this will be up by tonight. If not, it'll be up by tomorrow.
Why don't you get some rest and just put it up tomorrow?
Sounds like a great idea. Let's see if I'll allow myself to do that
Okay.
as the night progresses. And thanks to all the wonderful listeners. You guys are awesome too. And until next time, joyous journeys and amazing adventures. Good night, everybody.
See you soon.
See you soon.